I cut off my parents after they chose my manipulative sister over me on a family vacation. But when she got arrested and sabotaged the trip, my parents finally opened their eyes to her true nature. Now, after years of being ignored and blamed, my parents are asking for my forgiveness. Should I give it after all this time? I'm Anna, 23 female, and I have a younger sister, Mia, 18 female, who I swear is the physical embodiment of evil. I spent my whole life trying to warn my parents about her true personality, but until recently, they never took me seriously. Now, finally, they're starting to understand who she really is. Some background. My relationship with my parents has always been a bit strained, mostly because of how they treat Mia. My parents absolutely dote on her. The reason is pretty tragic. Before having Mia, my mom miscarried, which scarred her deeply. When Mia was born a few years after that, she was considered their miracle, the child who mended their heartbreak. From then on, my parents made her the sun around which we all orbited. Constant praise, attention, affection. Let me be clear, I really loved Mia when we were kids. It's just that over time, I saw she had the supernatural talent for manipulation, and for making herself the victim. She twisted everything in her favor, and no one else seemed to realize it. I remember on my birthday, our grandparents gave me a beautiful antique pocket watch. My grandma explained it was a family heirloom, and I was over the moon. Mia was clearly jealous. She kept pestering me to let her have it, but since it was my gift, I refused. She even tried to get our parents to intervene, but because it was from our grandparents, they didn't do anything. That night, Mia, knowing I'm scared of spiders, put a spider inside my pillowcase. When I went to bed, I freaked out, screaming as it crawled on me. My parents came running, and Mia put on her best concerned sister act. Later, alone, she looked at me with this creepy, gleeful grin and admitted she put the spider there to teach me a lesson. She felt zero guilt. There was another time, back in high school, when I had a huge crush on a classmate, Aaron. I'd finally mustered up the courage to invite Aaron over to watch a movie. I'd picked out an outfit that I thought would really impress him. I was so excited. But the moment Aaron got to the house, Mia accidentally dumped a full glass of juice on my dress, and then laughed in my face. Humiliated, I had to change, all the while trying to hide my embarrassment. Mia then regaled Aaron with the most humiliating childhood stories about me she could remember, and wouldn't leave us alone for a second. When Aaron was leaving, Mia smirked at him and said he could do way better than me. Aaron looked super uncomfortable and left in a hurry. I just couldn't wrap my head around how cruel Mia could be. Despite all this, every time I told my parents about Mia's antics, they just dismissed it. She's just young and naive, or you two should get along. Slowly, I just stopped complaining at all. Mia stayed the golden child, while I, the brutally honest one, always felt left out in my own family. My solution was to throw myself into schoolwork. I got into a good university and finally moved out. Being away at college meant I didn't have to deal with Mia or my parents' favoritism. When I visited during breaks, though, Mia made her hostility obvious. She'd ignore me, refuse to have basic conversations, sit as far away from me as possible at dinner. Interrupt if I tried to talk to my parents. Anything she could do to make me feel like an outsider. She'd borrow my stuff and return it broken or not at all. I raised these issues, but my parents insisted we needed to get along, so eventually I just stayed away for holidays and breaks. Mia never went to a 4-year college. Her grades weren't good enough, so she stayed at community college and continued living at home. I got a job I love at a big company in San Francisco, and while I keep in touch with my parents, I almost never visit, and I haven't talked to Mia at all. Things changed after my dad had a near-fatal heart attack. He survived, thankfully, and after the hospital, my mom called me, so I dropped everything and flew home. The doctors gave Dad a ton of meds and told him he needed to start working out. Since then, my dad has wanted to spend more time together as a family, feeling lucky to be alive. I didn't want to refuse him, so I stayed at my parents' house for a couple of weeks, working remotely. Mia was obviously furious I was back, but I did my best to ignore her. After all, Dad's health was the priority. One morning at breakfast, Dad suggested a family vacation, our first in years. I wasn't thrilled for obvious reasons, but it meant a lot to Dad, so I said yes. Mia looked distinctly unenthusiastic, but couldn't get out of it. Dad booked all the flights and hotels, I arranged my leave from work, and I eagerly anticipated some family bonding. But when we got to the airport, I discovered my plane ticket had been canceled. Dad swore he'd bought everyone's tickets together, and we checked everything, but out of all 4 tickets, only mine was specifically canceled. When I looked over at Mia, she was watching me with that familiar, nasty, triumphant smirk. I immediately knew she'd done it, probably using Dad's computer. I confronted her, but she just kept smiling. My parents, of course, refused to believe it was her. Mom told me not to be jealous and insisted it was a freak accident. Dad wondered if the airline just screwed up. There were no flights left that day, and while I could have flown out the next morning and met them, by that point I was too angry and humiliated to want to go. Dad weakly suggested we all just go back home and rebook, but then he started talking about how he'd been waiting years for this trip. Mom said I travel so much for work. Missing out on this vacation wasn't a big deal. It was clear they really didn't care if I came. Begrudgingly, I told them to go ahead without me if they wanted. They agreed, and I was left standing by myself in the airport, feeling like a complete outsider. I went back home to San Francisco, determined not to dwell on it, and focused on enjoying my unexpected time off. I hung out with friends, read, and tried to have a restful solo staycation. During their trip, my parents would FaceTime me now and then. They looked like they were having the time of their lives with Mia, not missing me whatsoever. Seeing how little my absence mattered just reinforced everything I'd felt all these years about their preference for Mia. But karma, or maybe just the truth, finally came for my parents. A few days into the trip, I woke up to dozens of missed calls from Mom. Fearing the worst about Dad's heart, I called immediately. Mom was frantic, saying something terrible happened. Apparently, they'd been noticing Dad's critical heart medications disappearing. A crisis since his life literally depended on them. Stuck overseas and unable to easily get refills, they tore their hotel room apart, looking for his missing pills. Out of desperation, Mom went into Mia's hotel room to borrow sunscreen. While Mia was out, Mom discovered every single missing pill, carefully tucked away in Mia's nightstand. Chills ran down her spine. Mia had been intentionally endangering our dad's life. Mom called me in panic. I told her not to confront Mia until they got home, said she's a manipulator and would just come up with some excuse. I knew they needed to be clear-headed and have all the facts, but apparently they couldn't hold it in. Later that night, Dad called me. His voice was trembling as he told me that Mia had been arrested. When they confronted her over the meds, she exploded, throwing things, cursing at them, screaming that Dad should never have booked me a ticket, and threatening to make them pay if they kept a relationship with me. Her meltdown was so severe that the hotel staff called the police. When the officers showed up, Mia insulted them and refused to calm down, so they took her into custody. My parents were devastated, and after Mia's 24-hour hold, tried to catch an early flight back home, but they discovered their passports and wallets were missing. Turns out Mia had hidden them or tossed them somewhere, trapping my parents overseas. Alone and desperate, Mom finally called me, sobbing, admitting she'd been wrong about Mia all these years and begging for my help. I wired them money and urged them to find their passports. Confident Mia hadn't actually destroyed them. This was the first time my parents finally saw Mia's real character. They were horrified, and for the first time, apologized for never believing me. Part of me wanted to forgive them, but it's honestly hard. After so many years of being the scapegoat, I can't just move on from all the hurt. AITA for not immediately forgiving them when they come running back after leaving me out. Now that they're in real trouble, update 1. Every day, my parents call me with updates, and I'm getting more anxious for them. When Mia was released from jail, my parents confronted her and demanded she return their passports or they'd call the police. Left with no options, Mia finally told them where to find the documents. When they got home, they told Mia to pack her things and move out. They were convinced now that she was a genuine threat, especially given her willingness to risk Dad's health. This set off another huge fight. Mia screamed at our parents, saying she never wanted to share them with anyone, especially me, insisting they should disown me and that she alone was enough for them. When they wouldn't back down, Mia flew into another rage, vowing to tell everyone that they abused and neglected her as a child, threatening to go to the police with lies to destroy their reputation. Since both of my parents are respected doctors, this terrified them. They're now living in fear that she'll make good on her threats. It's only gotten worse. When Mia found out they'd been speaking to me regularly, She started breaking dishes and hiding their car keys to keep them from going to work. Tonight, Mom called me in tears after another blow-up. Mia demanded dinner, and when Mom, exhausted from work, said no, she smashed furniture and blasted music all night so my parents couldn't sleep. I'm seriously concerned and want them to talk to a lawyer for a long-term solution. Going the legal route may be the only way to finally get some peace. Update 2. Mia's been arrested again. After weeks of escalating abuse, one night she came at my parents with a knife during an argument. They were forced to call the police, and she was arrested for assault. My parents finally found the courage to consult a lawyer and started the eviction process, serving Mia with formal notice to move out. They bailed her out, but delivered her the paperwork anyway, making it clear she had to leave. Taking her to court was one of the hardest things my parents have ever done, but they followed the rules so Mia couldn't challenge it. The judge ruled that Mia has to be out next week or she'll be permanently removed by law enforcement. My parents are finally breathing a little easier, knowing a chapter is closing. I'm staying in close contact and will bring them to stay with me in San Francisco for a while, to give them some time to decompress and heal. I want us to reconnect and for them to have some relief after these brutal months. Update 3. I've had hundreds of comments and suggestions, mostly telling us to get Mia assessed for mental health issues. The thing is, as an adult, we can't force her into an evaluation, and with all her sudden outbursts, pushing her could just make things worse. As mentioned before, my parents came to SF to stay with me for a week. Sitting around my dining table, they finally opened up with humility and regret. Both Mom and Dad acknowledged how they'd failed me by giving all their attention to Mia and ignoring my warnings. Dad was honest. He admitted he just couldn't believe their miracle baby could turn out like this. Mom's voice was trembling as she apologized for all the years she wrote me off as jealous or troublesome. For the first time, I told them all about what Mia had put me through. They listened in shock and apologized for the pain and isolation I'd suffered. We agreed it will take time to fully rebuild trust, but just having them acknowledge what happened is a huge first step. For the rest of their stay, we're focusing on enjoying each other's company and slowly putting things back together. Update 4. Over the next few days, we actually had fun, walking the SF streets, sharing meals, making up for lost time. My parents admitted coming here wasn't just about distance from Mia, but about rebuilding relationships and starting over. We can't simply abandon Mia, no matter how much hurt she's caused. They feel a responsibility to her as parents. And I get it. We suspect something deeper is at play, maybe needing professional help, but unless she wants it, we can't force her. They're planning to reach out to her once they're home and try to talk things over in a neutral, public place, less chance of another blow-up. The goal is for Mia to finally hear our side and to recognize that despite everything, we love her and want her to get help, not just to point fingers, but to actually work through our issues as a family. That brings this story to a close. This story is a stark example of what unchecked favoritism and denial can do to a family, and how seeing the truth, no matter how late, can pave the way toward real healing. Sometimes, recognizing someone's true nature comes at a terrible cost. Here is a question for you. If your family was blinded by the golden child effect, would you ever be able to fully forgive them? Share your thoughts below.